Okay, we're ready for our next item on the agenda, which is interview with Spidermind Games. And I'm going to pass you straight over to your host, the spectacularly colourful and bright Jonathan Stabler.
Oh, thank you, Grant. The only reason I'm wearing this shirt is because I haven't done any washing. So it's all I could find in the wardrobe this morning. I was going to use like a beach background or something, but I couldn't find one I liked. So yeah, welcome to this. This is the Spider-Man Games interview, in particular about Legendary Kingdoms. And joining me is John and Oliver from Spider-Man Games. Say hello.
Hello.
How are you guys?
Yeah. Well, we're good. We're a little confined. We're quite disappointed we're not actually at Lavecon because we've been kind of pining for it. But happy to be here in this capacity, as it were.
And also really, bowled over by just how much organisational pivot had to happen last minute. So well done, Karen Allen and Grant and Psycho and everyone else who's behind the scenes, because it can't have been easy.
No, totally. Okay, so I mean, what's Spider-Man Games been up to 2020 and 2021?
Well, we have probably spent the majority of this year dealing with shipping, which might not seem too difficult. You just give your boxes to a courier, that courier sticks their boxes onto trucks and planes and delivers them. But with a lockdown and with Brexit, I don't think someone could have gone away and designed a more impossible and awkward situation for anybody shipping physical items around the world than the one we've currently got. So that has taken up quite a lot of our time. But in the background, we've been plotting and planning. We ran Kickstarter for Legendary Kingdoms book 2 earlier this year. I think Oliver's going to explain a bit more about the goings on behind the LK series. We are also in the very tentative early stages of running our next Kickstarter campaign for Dragon Eye Dice, which is basically we've designed a new way of making dice for those who like role-playing games. We've managed to develop a new process by which we can place nice looking items like dragon eyes into the middle of dice and have them staring out to you through the top number. So every time you roll a critical roll, there's the dragon eye looking back at you. So that's a new Kickstarter we're about to launch, probably beginning of August. Also very exciting, we've got a new e-commerce site, beginnings of which are starting to trade in the US, which means that our biggest audience now have local postage rates to get stuff over to them, which has always been a bit of a nightmare. It's not brilliant buying a board game from us for 50 quid and then having to spend 60 quid on shipping it over to the US. That was never a good thing. So it's been a busy year and quite a lot of challenges, but we've been managing them like everybody else has, and really looking forward to everybody getting their upgrades, their Windows upgrades. I've just had mine second, so I'm now completely lurgy free in direct line to Bill Gates, which is great. And hopefully next year we can all meet up and actually have a beer together.
Cool. Okay, well we'll jump into Legendary Kingdoms. That's why we're there. For those who haven't heard about it, could you tell us a bit about it at all?
So Legendary Kingdoms is it's a game book. Those are the books like in Fighter Fantasy or Choose Your Own Adventure, where instead of reading it in order, you make choices and kind of turn to the right page. It's quite a big and ambitious game book though, because it's a multi-party game book. So rather than just having one person, you have lots of people who are in your party. You got kind of 4 party members who you get to choose, or you can create your own party members. It's set in a very big sandbox world, so you can do quests in any order that you want to. You can actually also play the books in any order that you want to. It's designed basically to be a bit like a role-playing game campaign. So if you've ever done a fancy role-playing game that's kind of like lasted for years of consecutive games, and you've gone from kind of absolute novices to people who are deciding the fate of the world. This is a game book that tries to emulate that. So, there's rules in it for owning your own ships, for mass combat. So, you can have armies in it and so forth. You can sort of overthrow kind of corrupt kings. You can try to become, a baron or a count yourself and kind of own land, or you can just kind of potter around the land, kind of doing adventures, going into dungeons, helping people or robbing people. It's very, very open world, and hopefully, so far people have been enjoying it. Anyway, it's gone down quite well so far. Sort of book one, and book two did very well. The race was at £200,000, John, something like that. So it was
just over, I believe.
Just over, yeah. So it was a really good campaign, and I'm writing book three at the moment. So there we go.
Okay. So as a kind of a flavor or for the theme and things like that, can you maybe describe some of the inspirations that people might understand behind the game?
I think the main inspirations would be kind of the classic fighting fantasy game books from the 1980s, which actually, if you've never seen Warlock Fight at Mountain or Death Trap Dungeon, those are the books that got me into kind of fantasy RPGs. So before I, was kind of mentally ready for Dungeons and Dragons, I kind of played those game books. So they're a big introduction. The biggest single inspiration for Legendary Kingdoms is something called the Fabled Lands. And the Fabled Lands, for those who played it kind of back in the 90s, it's kind of considered the holy grail of game books, because the Fabled Lands was a book that you could, a series of books you can do in any order. Every book is a different geographical location, and you can hop from place to place. So Legendary Kingdoms does that. It's got the ability to sort of, remember your actions, and, the world isn't divided into various little bits. But I've attempted to create, a modern version with kind of like a full party system, but that's still kind of, easy enough that it's not like having kind of 4 separate D&D character sheets in front of you and kind of trying to deal with that full complexity. It's just slightly streamlined down, but it's got that kind of, same feel, of adventure in it.
We've also had quite a lot of people come back to us and say that, having got their hands on book one, that they've really enjoyed GMing the book. A lot of people are quite nervous about GMing, especially now that there are a lot of online GM heroes who make the whole thing look easy. And so some people are a bit reluctant to give their first go at D&D sat behind a GM screen a go. So people have enjoyed narrating this with other people in their group, taking the role of some of the characters and making it into an adventure, which has been interesting, because I know Oliver didn't design it that way, but it is so easy to be able to play with a group that we found it is quite a nice tool for people who want to cut their teeth having a go at GMing. Could do this first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, a lot of the because we've been in lockdown, a lot of the playtesting that we did, especially for book two, was done that exact way. So I had to people had joined me on Roll20, and I was kind of running them through the adventure and taking the feedback and so forth. So yeah, it does. It works very nicely with that. So yeah, it's like doing kind of like a D&D campaign, but the GM is kind of like done automatically, as it were. So that's quite fun.
And there's been no inspiration for any of the scenes taken from any popular sci-fi film of the 1980s at all.
Well, the 1970s, that particular one. Yeah. So
was it made in the 70s? Wow.
Yeah, 77 or 76 Star Wars. Yeah, anyway, sorry, we'll just talk amongst ourselves. Jump in whenever you like, John.
I mean, it's something that I haven't done for a long time. I mean, when I was in school, I did a few like kind of choose your own adventure books. I didn't do the fighting fantasy ones. In fact, I don't think I played Warlock on Firetop Mountain until there was like a PC
yeah,
desktop version of
Yeah.
it with like animations and stuff, and Chris Jarvis.
yeah,
I'd go on that.
brilliant.
So like, you know, how much is this like gonna be to like choose your own adventure? Because obviously you've made allusions to like D&D and, you know, GMing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, how similar is it to that basic kind of choose your own adventure?
So structurally, it's the same. So the basic core of choose your own adventure books is that, you know, you read what's happening and you're given a bunch of choices, you know, to choose from. Legendary Kingdoms is just like that. So, you know, if sometimes the choices are very easy. So, you know, if you're in a dungeon corridor and you can go west, you know, east or south, and there's a door in the wall, you know, I'd say, do you want to go through the door? Do you want to go west, you know, east or south? Other times, for instance, you can come into a city and, you know, cities, of course, are absolutely enormous. And instead of 4 choices, you have like 18 choices. So, you know, you might want to go to the marketplace, visit the governor, you kind of, you know, explore the city generally, find the Thieves Guild. If there's people you already know in the city, you can go and visit them, go to temples. There's all sorts of kind of, you know, different choices. And Legendary Kingdoms is one of the main kind of design points around it is that, because I play as well as kind of, you know, kind of GM games, is that I try to imagine all the realistic ideas that people would do. So normally, if there's an interaction, you know, I'll give you hopefully about 3 or 4 choices to choose from in each case. I won't normally choose stupid things. So, for instance, if you're kind of, you know, one of those disruptive players, for instance, who there's a bomb is about to go off, you go, I'll shoot the bomb with my gun. You probably won't find that option in Legendary Kingdoms.
What kind of an idiot would do that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, no, I'm not thinking of anyone specifically, but if you know, it's more likely, you know, most people want to disarm the bomb, you know, try and get away as far as possible, or maybe they'd like ring a friend. I don't suppose you know how to disarm bombs, do you, Bob? Type situation. Those are the kinds of choices that you'd have in Legendary Kingdoms, rather than I'll put a bucket on my head and I'll drop my trousers and run and kind of like waddle around the room in panic. Those sorts, you know, it takes itself seriously, and so in that way, it can never quite be the perfect role-playing game. But you know, for all the common sense choices, I've tried to cover them. So yes, it's very similar to kind of choose your own adventures. The difference is it's more similar, I'd say, to Fighting Fantasy, because Fighting Fantasy has a combat system in it, and it's got, you know, at least a few statistics and so forth. So it's a full-on RPG game. You've got inventory management. You've got people who are spellcasters. You've got people who are stealth specialists. People who are kind of, you know, very good at fighting. You're kind of rangers who are superb at kind of wilderness survival and so forth. So it's structurally like an RPG, but it is, you know, it's a choose your own adventure book, you know, at its core.
But the first one of the first things you are asked when you begin the game is to choose your 4 characters that you will control.
Yeah.
As Oliver mentioned, there are different classes of character you can take, but you control a party, not just a single adventurer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say, a lot of thought has gone into the preset characters. So the preset characters, there are 6 books in the Legendary Kingdom series. There will be. We're on books. I'm writing book 3 at the moment, and book 2 is about to be released. Every book, every one of the 6 characters you can choose from is from that kind of land. So, you know, Akiro is from the Valley of Bones. And he was a former kind of Kensai kind of sword saint, or at least he tried to be. He tried to become a Kensai, but failed his tests. then you get to decide whether you want to try and bring him through the trials again. You don't have to. You can go, well, I don't want to be a Kensai, so I'm just going to go and do other things. But there is that kind of quest in the book. Amelia, who's just flashed up now, she's from the Savage Lands. She is the bastard sister of another player character who is a knight. And so kind of one sister got all the love and affection, and the other was, for all intents and purposes, outcast. And that kind of creates a bit of a tension in the relationships kind of between them. So every character has got their own background story, but they've also got their own kind of like active quest in the books. They're, for the most part, all optional. So you don't have to, if you don't want to do Brash's subquest, you don't have to. But the option is there if you want to kind of like round the character out. And there's normally sound kind of like statistical reasons for doing it, because if you can get a character through their personal quest, their stats boost up, and they become sort of happier and more settled within themselves. So there's a lot kind of going on with the player characters, but you can just make your own player characters if you like. If you don't like any of the characters in the book, you just go, no, I'll make my own, and that's also completely fine.
So with the characters, if you do want to roll your own or whatever, how long is it actually going to take you to kind of get into the game? Because obviously there's a big variation with games, how long it takes to get things set up.
Yeah. It doesn't take very long in Legendary Kingdoms generally. When you first start, all you have to do is choose your characters. There's 6 statistics, which you'll write down in your character sheet. If you chose any spellcasters, you choose a few spells for them as well, 3 each, and then you go. So you don't have to worry about pre-equipping your characters. You'll find equipment along the way. Sometimes in some books, when you begin, every book, book 1, you begin as slaves, so you don't start off with any of your equipment, and you've got to kind of scavenge and find equipment as best as you can. Some other books, because every book is capable of being played alone, so if you just bought book 2 and you don't fancy the sound of the Valley of Bones, you can just play book 2 and that's fine, and never go into the other books if you like. But some books you'll be given a bit of preset equipment as well. But the setup in most books, it's quite easy. You write down a few numbers, and you're more or less straight off, which is an intentional design decision, because I don't want people to be too bound up reading the rules ahead of time. A lot of the kind of advanced rules and kind of subtler ways of playing Legendary Kingdoms, those rules only get introduced later. So you don't have to worry about how potions work, for instance, until you actually find a potion, and then the book will tell you how it works. And you don't have to worry about naval combat until you own a boat, and you're actually dealing with that then. So that what you don't have is like an instruction manual at the beginning, which is like this thick, and you just go, oh no, I can't be bothered to play this game. There's slightly more setup than like with the Fighting Fantasy book, with just it's like 3 stats and you're rolling it. But we've tried to make it as smooth as possible, so that the rules are kind of like gently introduced, as you go.
We've also got a great community behind us, one of whom is a professional app developer in his day job, and he has put together a fantastic companion app that allows you to track various aspects of your game. If the idea of using a character sheet, pencil and an eraser doesn't appeal, you can have this app on your iPad or phone and track your battles with that instead.
Okay. So, with all these options going on, from my memory of like the choose your own adventure stuff, there was like a lot of, I don't know, empty choices that just took you in loops, or, just killed you off or whatever. Where on the spectrum would you put Kingdoms in, like there's a linear kind of, you've got to do it this way to win, to something where, there's lots of outcomes?
So there is a final win state in Legendary Kingdoms if you want it. In terms of how, I think what you're trying to nudge towards is how ruthless is kind of like Legendary Kingdoms compared to like Death Trap Dungeon and some others that like arbitrarily kill you. It's not that ruthless. There are a few occasions where things can go dreadfully wrong and you can get a total party kill. They're relatively rare. So kind of in terms of its overall danger, I try not to do too many complete wipeouts. Happens sometimes, but it's not too bad. In terms of sort of is there like a one true way to win? No, there's no one true way to win. There's lots of different ways that you can approach kind of the game. In terms of is there an end? There is an end. Probably the best way to put it is that each book there's kind of three things that kind of every book has to do. Every book has to have a main plot. So book one's main plot is dealing with a group of violent desert kings who have been oppressing people and trying to overthrow them and put someone better onto the throne. You don't have to engage in the main plot, but if you do, that's the main challenge of the book. And you've got to sort of raise armies for the goodies and try and kind of conquer the baddies one by one. Every book also has a character plot as well. So in book one, because Akira was born in the Valley of Bones, you can resolve his personal kind of crisis, as we've discussed earlier. Can he become a sword saint where he and his father and his grandfather had failed? However, secretly in every book, there is also something which I call the mega quest. The mega quest is something that only activates towards the end of your time in Legendary Kingdoms. And what it is a quest that links all the books together. So the idea is that once you've played each book in whatever order that you choose, and you've done all those main plots, your characters are super powerful and they're tough. And by the time you're getting to the end, you're probably finding the game just a little bit easy because you've thoroughly searched everywhere. You've got great equipment, great spells, and your stats are really high. And you think, oh well, there's no challenge in this anymore. Well, the mega quest is the answer to that problem. Because there is, it lies kind of like under the surface of the books, kind of locked away in secret, secret areas of every book. You can't accidentally stumble across it for the most part in Legendary Kingdoms. Once you get super powerful, a mega quest opens up whereby effectively you can, change the fate of the world. And save it from disaster. And every book has got a little secret kind of component of that. Some books have larger areas than others. But yeah, you can, it means that once you've done everything, you've got one final like victory lap where you can go around the world, kind of finding all the various bits that you need, kind of defeating, different enemies. And it's pitched really, really hard. So it's completely ruthless. And generally, it's the mega quest is set at the Death Trap Dungeon style level of you make a bad choice and you die. It's a or if you haven't got the right equipment, you'll probably snuff it. It's for those veteran players who have gone through every book and they've exhausted almost every choice, and it's the final challenge that you can do. Almost certain that the first time you play Legendary Kingdoms, all the way through, you probably won't succeed at Mega Quest. That's going to be, your long-term goal, kind of years down the line. If I've pitched it right, there'll be some show-off who does it all in one go, in which case I hate you. Thanks. That's how it's pitched. So there is a final end to the game if you want there to be. You go on the Mega Quest, and then see if you can save the world.
Okay. You've already said that the books could be played in any sequence, but is there actually a benefit to playing them in order?
Yeah. I anticipate that most people will play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There is a benefit. Some people, when they saw book 2, they saw that the characters in book 2, if you choose to start in book 2, then your stats are higher. And so they leap to the erroneous conclusion of, well, all I need to do then is just wait till book 6. I'll take the characters from that, and then I'll go back to book 1. It's not as easy as that. There's all kinds of things that are will hold you back. Generally speaking, if you start from the beginning and you're really, really thorough with Legendary Kingdoms, rather than just, I'll just tick off the main quest bits and then I'll go away. If you're searching every nook and cranny, and if you're finding all the little bits and pieces, you will have an easier time in the following books than someone who starts in book 2 and just does book 2 first. And you'll also be able to sort of like unlock secret areas that only you know about because you've done book 1. I don't want to go into too many details because I don't want to spoil too much. But yes, it rewards people who have sort of gone through it the long way, who've started off, at 0 and made their way to the top. However, as I've said, you absolutely can play in the order that you choose. So because I don't know, as a publisher, what book someone's going to pick up, they might start with like book 4, in which case book 4 has to be able to stand on its own, as a fun product, or no one's ever going to play any of the other books. So every book can be completed, just unto itself. But the game is a bit more fun when you've got lots of books to play with, and you can kind of swap between, and you borrow armies from kind of one area to another, or you find the super special ship in book 3 and use it to kind of sink the pirates in book 6 or whatever. There's lots of things that reward your patience and your searching. So yeah, starting at book 1 is probably the most rewarding way to play, but it's your choice. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, because I seem to remember when I was doing choose your own adventures that I'd like keep a finger in the page when I jump.
Yes.
And effectively cheat. So how can you fix that? And have you managed to do that?
So everyone does it. Knock yourself out. I mean, there's little things I've done to stop it. First of all, I don't object to people playing the game how they want. So there will be people who'll buy Legendary Kingdoms and think, this looks fun, but I don't want to bother with all the dice and writing down and stuff. And that's fine. And so they will read it and they'll just go, I'll just pass, every skill check, and, I'll just remember things as I go along. The main defenses against finger in the book, not that it really needs one, but the main defenses are, first of all, the book is complex. So it needs, if you're not writing down kind of the special kind of code numbers as you go along. Just to talk about codes. Codes are the way that the book remembers what you do. So let's say you save a peasant from a group of thieves as you're kind of like wandering the countryside. Well, what happens? You'll get a code, something like B7. And you'll write that down. And that means that when you next wander that bit of the countryside, you don't find another peasant who is, being sort of, beaten up by, the same thugs. B7 is remembered. It'll ask you, do you have the code B7? If you do, then the event, with the peasant won't happen. It remembers that, that's happened. And likewise, if you save the peasant, you might get a code B8. Then you might bump into the peasant later, at his house, and they'll go, oh, I remember you. My grandfather, this amazing magic cloak. I think, you saved me. I think you should have it, type situation. The book remembers through the codes. Now, because books generally have about 100 codes each, for a casual player who's just flicking through the book, holding things with the page with their fingers, they're just not going to be able to store, unless they got like an eidetic memory or something, they're not going to be able to store all those codes, in their brains at once. In terms of the mega quest, that's very hard to stumble on accidentally, because the way that you get to the mega quest sections is through a formula, basically. So you're not asked what page to turn to. There is a bit of trigger text, and then you'll use a formula to get to the page. By that point, that sounds complicated. It's not really. It's basically just a defense so that you don't accidentally stumble into a demigod in the first book, for instance, or come to a place that you just have no chance of, kind of getting through. So there are defenses against the finger strategy, but I don't mind if people use fingers. I don't mind, honestly, if people buy the book and they just read through it as a as a story, that's absolutely fine. I don't mind.
So, I mean, you're talking about, the ability to kind of just consider it as a story. What was your like kind of approach to the design of the narrative? Did you do it from the point of wanting to tell a story, or was it like more from a gaming point of view?
It was a little bit of both. You've got to you could really only include content in a game book that your game system can cope with. So because for Legendary Kingdoms I had a very, very kind of like I had a massive D&D campaign style idea going through my head. I realized that in advance I had to create systems that could cope with it. So even before I got anywhere near writing the first book, I knew I needed, naval combat, a mass combat system, a way to remember kind of choices that players make. I need a kind of coherent currency system. I need an advanced currency system so that people, if they get very rich with silver, can't then just buy everything in the game. There's a secondary system of currency called gold bullion, which lets you buy very big things, and that can only be found through questing. And so all of the sort of like the decisions, like for instance, I wanted there to be a romance system in Legendary Kingdoms because I'm a big fan of the early kind of Black Isle games, like Baldur's Gate and so forth, where your party like kind of romance each other and they have relationships. That in mind, I had to make sure that I had a trackable romance system that would, work throughout the whole thing. If I decided that, in book 3 that I wanted a romance system, it's kind of too late because the first 2 books don't have any romance in them, and it'd be just odd if it happened in only like 1 book. So yeah, the mechanics had to be sort of created first to allow everything else to be layered on top of it. So I suppose it was a little bit simultaneous because I wanted to have a rich, vibrant world that you could interact with more or less in any way that you want, but on the basis that people who want to do kind of real power gaming, they want to seize control of cities with armies, and they want to have fleets of ships. I had to make sure that those mechanics existed first before the first Legendary Kingdoms book was put in. So there are mechanics, for instance, in book 1 in the advanced rules section, which you'll never use because your characters aren't powerful enough to use it. But they had to sort of be there, like in the back of the book, nicely hidden, for when you did need it a bit later. So yeah, I would say it was an equal balance. But Legendary Kingdoms is quite ambitious. I wanted to. Game books have been out of fashion for years and years. They're starting to come back, sort of into fashion now, kind of in a small way. And I wanted there to be a torchbearer for what they could be. So I wanted really the most ambitious kind of design that I could think of, and then just sort of kind of go out there and do it. So it was right from the start. Going to have it needed these mechanisms to be worked out so that I could tell the huge story I wanted to tell.
Earlier on, Anthony was showing us some of the 3D printing he was done, and he mentioned Fallout and the Pip-Boy that he'd made, and I was thinking about LK then. When I first saw this, Oliver pitched the idea and said, here's a draft, play through it. It reminded me of Skyrim and Fallout 4, both of which I enjoy playing, because yes, there is a main plot. You can do it if you want, but you can take sides. You don't have to do the main plot as the main hero. There are lots of side quests you can get involved in. You can go pretty much anywhere and everywhere you want. You can have companions, or you can go solo. If there's a lot of similarities with the two, and I was amazed at just how clever it seemed to be, because I probably the same as you, John, my first experience of a game book was one person walking through a dungeon. So the choices were fairly straightforward: forward, right, left, through the door, whatever. And this is, of course I'd say it, I'm the producer of the game, but this is absolutely miles apart from those very basic. And it was ambitious, and thankfully we're now starting to get a fan base who agree that it's worked, because there was no idea that this would be received when it was first launched. It was a brave thing for Oliver to just go, nope, I've invented a new system and here it is, and to just throw it out there. But thankfully it seems to be working.
Yeah, I mean, with the community, I mean, have you found that, did it build up slowly over time, or did it kind of get a boost after the success of the level up stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the level up has basically allowed much more investment into the project. Before, it was an organic growth by, osmosis. We sell books, people learn about them, people talk about them, game book websites find out and interview us and this sort of stuff. But thankfully, with the success of the level up, it has just meant we can invest money in advertising. We have our sample that people can download, which is the first 40 pages of the first book. You get that for free. You get to have a go. There's the Facebook page, which is the Legendary Kingdoms Adventures. Oliver has now been running a weekly adventure for all the backers on the Kickstarter page, a complete standalone adventure, nothing to do with book 3, but he's been running that on a weekly basis. So we've been able to spend a lot more time, energy, and yes, money on getting it out there and communicating to people. And it's lovely to see a lot of people coming back to game books. Oliver said just a minute ago how game books have kind of fallen out of fashion, but to be part of that resurgence, to be part of that new church, you kind of have to go out there and spread the word. And I have to say the level up has allowed us to do that much more effectively.
Yeah, it's I think what it is, the level up didn't directly sort of create the audience for Legendary Kingdoms, but I think what it did show is that it showed us how to advertise a product in the modern era. It was the methodology with how you do it. And it was a similar thing when we did the ice dice as well. With the ice dice, we were wondering, can sort of lightning strike twice, as it were. What happens if we create a totally different product, but advertise using the same system, and yes, it works. So I think it's slightly indirect. Yeah, the level up. I think the level up basically allowed us both the funds to advertise Legendary Kingdoms in the way that it needed,
and the know-how.
I think that's the crucial thing, because the first book of LK has been out since 2019. And there are, you originals who played it, including Alison, who's amazing, have basically they've been like little kind of torch bearers for it. But it sold something like 700 copies before we did the Legendary Kingdoms 2 launch, and then suddenly it was a case of you need to print another kind of 2,000, 4,000 copies in order to sort of keep up with demand and so forth. So it's been really good. It's just allowed the company to produce more things, and it's made Crown and Tower, which is book 2 of Legendary Kingdoms, possible. So yeah, and they're a lovely bunch. The community that's around it, they're really enthusiastic. The guy who's done our app, which John talked about earlier, he's just a fan, but he's not the only one. We've been approached by at least 3 companies all wanting to do apps for us. We've gone with this chap because he sort of did the best pitch and he'd already put so much work into it. But yeah, people play Legendary Kingdoms and they just seem to fall in love with it, which is fantastic. So it's got has a really enthusiastic community, and people have done fan art and so forth, and they've started to enjoy the lore of the world and so forth. So it's it's been a really positive experience doing it. So yeah, it's been lovely.
Just going back to something you mentioned before, you were talking about in the second or third book, it was that you started to have things like romance.
From the first book. From the first. Yeah.
So has anything actually changed, through the series at all? Have you introduced new stuff in any way?
Yeah, to an extent. Book 2, for instance, is is bigger than book one. There are two. This is a thing that actually authors we do have to be a bit careful of, and I've completely fallen afoul of it. So book one is 903 references, which is enormous for a game book. They normally sit around 400. Is like the Fighting Fantasy level, choose your own adventures, 250, 300, something like that, and that's considered, the sexy point of game books. 903, it was always going to be quite big, and 900, 1,000 references was kind of what I wanted for Legendary Kingdoms from the start. But LK2 has got up to just over 1,200 sections in the current edit, and it's. I think there's two reasons why that's happened. On the one hand, in the Kickstarter, we did promise to put in extra stuff, so that you got a bigger, better book, in exchange for funding it in advance, which is is a nice thing that you can do with Kickstarters. But I think it's probably a bit bigger because I think the tone is more serious in book two. So. A book one's story is kind of quite buccaneering, and this is actually a thing with Legendary Kingdoms. The odd numbered books, 1, 3, and 5, are the freewheeling buccaneering ones, and the even numbered ones tend to be a little bit more serious. They're a bit more kind of political, a bit more sort of physical interaction, an emotional interaction, and so they've required more work on the tone and on the writing, because the themes are a little bit darker.
Yeah, there's not just decisions about who do you bash and with what. Book two, especially as Oliver says, covers certain political issues, but some of the decisions that you're going to be making are as much political
or ethical, I think,
or ethical,
than
absolutely. They are anything to do with who you're bashing and with what.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if ever you're doing anything kind of with an intense social focus in a game book, rather than just a mechanistic thing like, you beat up the orc, you get the gold, it requires more pages, it requires more time. So I was slightly surprised with book two. I mean, if I hadn't have edited bits out of it, it would have been like 2,000 references long, and that's just too long for a book. It would be like too cumbersome to use kind of easily. But it is, it's gotten longer. I'm trying to do a bit of discipline. I'm going to try and get back book three back down to about 900 or so, simply because I think it flows a bit better. But in terms of extra things, there are new things that crop up in the books, which aren't in the original book. So book three, for instance, has Armada combat. But it's not quite fair to say that that's a new thing that I've introduced. I did plan it from the start. So when I was setting up the world, I knew that in book three, because it was so ship heavy, I wanted the ability for the players to have multiple ships, in a squadron or an armada, as I called them. It's completely incorrect, but I just like the sound of armada. So that you can have like kind of mass boat battles, because that's the theme of book three. And likewise, there are adjustments to the magic system. In book 1 and 2, you're quite constrained on the number of spells that you can know. That starts to open up about sort of book 3, book 4, as there are additional mechanisms for learning and kind of swapping out new spells and so forth. So there are new mechanics to find in the other books. I've just designed them in advance, that's all. So, which is not to say that I know everything that's going to happen when I write a book. There's still like, book 3 that I'm writing at the moment. I didn't know that Mortlock Mine, for instance, which is one of the locations, was going to exist before I wrote it in book 3. But I did know that there was, an evil demon captain called August Pryor in book 3, because that's the main plot. And so the main plots, and all the important bits are pre-written. The minor encounters and the minor dungeon areas, they come out organically in the book to kind of suit the flow. So you got a nice kind of varied experience as you go along.
Okay. I mean, right at the beginning, you were talking about how, with the pandemic and Brexit and stuff, that, shipping stuff's been a bit of a pain. But has there been any challenges with producing games within a pandemic?
Yeah, I think there are two things. It's mostly personal because when you're writing, one of the nice things about Spidermind games, first of all, is it's a very new company. It's less old than Lavecon is. Because going to Lavecon inspired us to create Spidermind games. But it's and as a consequence, we're very digital, and we always have been. I didn't write EDRPG. The Elite Dangerous role playing game. Using a typewriter. Of course, it was all done sort of digitally. Our artists use kind of digital methodology, and so it didn't bother us that some artists are from the States, others from Germany, or wherever. All of that is no problem because of the interconnected nature of the internet. I think the biggest effect, outside of John's experience, because John actually has to get products out to people, and he's had a nightmare with that. But I think it's psychological, because with book one, when I wanted to playtest that and check sections were all right and things weren't too hard, I could do it face to face with people, and I would get people of all ages to play, and we'll all have a jolly good time, and we'd eat pizza and chuckle. They'd drink a bit of alcohol. I'm teetotal because I'm pure. But it was a lovely social experience creating it. But two is very different. You're writing a lot in isolation, and that does have a bit of an impact on it. I think I don't think book two is hugely morose, but I think there are factors of it. Some of its serious nature, comes from the fact that we're kind of from a time where friends were dropping dead. We didn't know what was going to sort of happen in the future, and you're constrained about where you can go. And I think I was very lucky that I was writing a book about kind of essentially, book two is set in an area of Western Europe, and so it's the surroundings are the same as where I live. I think that was hugely advantageous to writing it, because a lot of Valley of Bones, is an amalgamation of places I've been, and kind of things I've seen and experienced. Well, your experiences are hugely constrained, when you're in lockdown, and so I think it was lucky that I was writing a book about a largely insular Western European style culture. Because where peasants aren't really allowed to leave their villages and so forth, because that was the kind of experience I was going through. But it's hard not playing with people and doing things digitally. I love Roll20, and I've run a continual Dungeons and Dragons campaign throughout. But I'm so desperate to have people come back around the table again to see them, because sometimes you can have a laugh in Roll20, but it's just not as much as you laugh.
Not quite the same.
It's not quite the same, is it? And so I think that psychological impact makes it harder to write, I think. But it's first world problems, isn't it? I'm still alive, and I got the book out. And our company is very lucky that we're games producers, and for the most part, games producers haven't gone out of business in lockdown. They've been enormously well supported, and so yes. Does that answer the question? I've got no idea.
No, that's fine. It was a pretty open-ended question. Right, I think I got one more before we wrap up. But before I do that, I was going to say you guys are going to be around this weekend. So if anybody's got any more questions, they can grab hold of you somewhere, or can they reach out to you on Twitter or something like that?
John, what's our thing? I'm very
Spidermind Games is on Twitter, but that actually is run by our American distribution company. Facebook Messenger is probably the best way to get in touch. or you can ask a question. I'll be around for the rest of the weekend, so
Oh, that's good
ping
news.
it up on the chat, and I'm sure Grant or someone will be able to throw it my way if I miss it.
Oh, and there's info at Spidermind Games as well, isn't there? I think. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Info at spidermindgames.co.uk if anybody wants to send us an email.
Okay, excellent. So just the last question is, what are the plans for the future of the series?
Okay, so
It's a big question. I
It's a
know.
big question. No, it's all right. It's all laid out. Legendary Kingdoms has 6 books. We're hoping that in spring of next year, as long as I can produce and I'm not stupid, we can start kickstarting book 3, which is called Pirates of the Splintered Isles. That is kind of inspired by the kind of pirate era, kind of a Caribbean, but it's got a Legendary Kingdoms twist on it. It's not quite the same, but yeah, get on your ship, explore strange new islands with kind of various bizarre things on them, and go and thwart some pirates and find some buried treasure. It's one of the jolly Legendary Kingdoms titles, what I mentioned earlier. Book 4 is called The Gilded Throne, which is set in Pendralore, which is the kind of a duchy in the Kingdom of Royce. That's the same kingdom that book 2 is based in. It's just like the northern part of it. And that is a book where there is a corrupt king who has outstayed his welcome, and you've got to try and unseat him by finding out all the dreadful things that he's done, and trying to get him ousted for all intents and purposes, or just wander around the place and have fun. Book 5 is called The Savage Lands, which is based in an untamed wilderness, where you have to do your own mapping in that one. We'll see how that one works out. I might change my mind before the end, but at the moment I want people to map their own environments. And the last book is called Drake Hallow. It's book number 6. It's the toughest of them all, and it's set sort of in a kind of it's kind of a steampunk China in a way. So it's very it's a place where kind of like industry and magical industry have started to overwhelm the kind of the countryside, and you've kind of got to save people from an apocalypse, as it were, of their own making. That's actually more details that we've given out about book 6, but there we are. That's roughly what it's about. There's just 6 books, because I think that's the optimum number of titles in my head anyway. And then if we want any more, we'd have to do a new series, basically.
Okay. Right. Well, thanks very much for that, Oliver and John.
No problem.
It's always good to speak to you guys, because it's not like pulling teeth. You guys can talk for hours. Which
Bless you.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment.
That's kind. No, I mean, just to say, Lavecon has always been hugely important to us, to me and John. It's where it all started. So yeah, we really look forward to seeing everyone next year. And I just want to play docking darts. I'm just desperate for a game of docking darts and to improve on my all-time high score of 50 points. Yeah, so I'll see you all next year.
Yep, fingers crossed for next year. All right, thanks again, guys, once more.
Well, thanks very much for having us.
Grant, can you get me some applause or something?
He hasn't prepped that, so
Oh.
or the blankety blank sound effect. Either would be appropriate.
Oh, there you go. You get a fan dabby dozy instead.
Well, even better. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys, and I'll see more of you this weekend, hopefully. So thanks a lot.
Catch you later. Bye.
Bye. Right, I get to hand back over to Lave HQ.